with all fungal problems, whether it's a leaf spot or mildew or black spot on roses, starting using a fungicide before the plant gets the problem is always more effective than treating it after the plant gets the problem. So if you know from the past that you have had particular problems, if you've had, I know what you're probably seeing now on perennials, is you're seeing peony botrytis. If you go out and take a look at your perennial peonies right now, you will see some of the buds are going to be nice and fat, as they should be, right? And some of the buds are going to be little and black. That is peony botrytis, and it's a fungal problem, and it comes from this darn weather. Cool, wet weather is a prescription for botrytis on lilacs. Your lilac leaves might be wrinkled. Your lilac leaves might have black edges, right? Serenade really does work to help combat peony botrytis. If the buds are already hard and black, it's not going to bring those back to life, but it can help protect the buds that are left. And when I look at the long-range forecast for the rest of this week and early next week, it's a little more of the same. That's right. For lilacs too? So for lilacs too, for any plant that has had a fungal problem, this can be a very good response. I've used it on my tomatoes to help prevent early blight. This is Bacillus subtilis. That's what what's in here. And basically how it works is this natural bacteria outcompetes the bad guys. So you put the Bacillus subtilis on the plant, and the Bacillus subtilis keeps away the colonies of the botrytis spores. They use this, not Serenade, but I read an interesting story about in World War I during trench warfare, the American troops at one point couldn't understand why the foreign troops weren't getting dysentery, and they were all sick with dysentery. They're all drinking the same water, they're all eating the same food, right? And because, they can see from one trench to another with binoculars, they had people start to look and see what the enemy was doing that they weren't doing, and why they didn't get dysentery. And what they were doing is they were eating small amounts of horse dung every day. Oh. Well, I mean, a tablespoon of horse dung or really bad diarrhea, I think is no contest, right? But the reason the horse dung was working is that it had Bacillus subtilis in it. And that natural bacteria protected them from the harmful bacteria. Okay, so it works the same in the garden, is that the natural bacteria can outcompete the other guys. And if I have a problem with any sort of fungal problem, this is really what I reach for first in my garden, because it's an organic solution, and I have had great success with the peony botrytis. And the whole goal, of course, is when the peonies come up and are only this tall, that's when you start to spray. And you spray as the buds are developing. The last time I sprayed with Serenade was 2 weeks ago on my peonies to try and preserve as many of those buds as possible in this sort of weather. And for the lilacs, it can be helpful too. For the mildew on lilacs, this is probably more effective. Yeah.
The Serenade, it's too late this year for Serenade on the peonies?
No, I don't think it's too late, because we've got stretches of cold, wet weather coming up. And so I think if you've got, buds that are still forming, which you should on your peonies now, you should have bigger buds and some smaller buds. Those smaller buds in particular can use the protection, yeah. So I don't think it's too late.
I was blaming the winter moth worm.
Winter moth, yeah. Well, we can blame the winter moth for a lot of things, but not for the peonies. Yeah. Yes.
Speaking of peonies, we moved into a house last year, and I found here and there little tiny peony sprouts.
Okay.
Are they going to grow into big peonies, or are they like rootstock or something?
Well, she found small peony sprouts in a new house, and they may be plants that have self-seeded. They may be plants that have petered out over time, right? And so what I would do to tell which that might be is I would go to those little peony sprouts, and I would dig down and see how far down the root is and how large the root is. If the crown of the root, you know, the root of a peony is kind of like this, and then the sprouts come out the top. And if the place where the sprouts are coming out the top of the root, if that's close to the surface of the soil, and it's not very big, that's probably a newly seeded peony. And it might be interesting to let it grow and see what you've got. You know, it might be worth it, or it might not, but you don't know.
So
That's
I
how.
don't want to put it in a major spot in the
Yeah,
garden.
yeah, but you know, it can be fun, when you have a self-seeded plant in the garden, it can be fun to let them grow and develop and see what you've got. That's how new plant varieties, a lot of them are developed and found. And you see a plant like, say, Geranium Johnson's Blue, well, there was a Johnson who found that growing in his garden and discovered that it was a little different from other geraniums, and it was named after him. So that's how new plants come about. And so that's what I would do. If you find that root is big and thick and fairly far down, it's probably a plant that has become less vigorous over time. And it might have become less vigorous over time because it's now in too much shade. Used to be in full sun, and as things grew, it's now in too much shade. Or it might have become less vigorous over time because that root is now buried too deeply. And if you go down more than, say, 2 inches before you hit that root, then you know that you need to dig that plant up and raise it so that that top of the crown is only about 2 inches down. Yes.
Serenade on the roses?
You can use Serenade on roses. Roses are the hardest things to combat. You know, black spot is really the hardest fungal problem. And there are some rosarians that use a combination. I mean, you should come and hear Irwin talk when he's here on the, what is it?
25th.
So, yeah, come and hear Irwin here, because he'll talk about organic rose care and least toxic rose care. And Irwin, he's a true rosarian. He has gone from spraying the most toxic fungicides known to man on his roses and moving to safer products. And he can talk about, most rosarians have found that just green cure alone isn't enough to protect. And so you could use green cure and a combination of Serenade. You could use green cure and mixed in with horticultural oil. At Longwood Gardens in Pennsylvania, they spray their roses with a mixture of baking soda and horticultural oil. But this is pretty much a similar thing. So, and they find that when they start doing that early in the season, they get good black spot protection. Now, we're a little late for black spot protection. When I go out and look at my roses, I see some of them already have it forming, because it forms in the cool, damp weather. The month of May and the end of April has been a prescription for black spot on roses. So protecting the foliage that isn't yet infected can be good, but if your roses get black spot, you know, there's just that's just what they're going to have this year because of this weather. So, and last year was such a glorious rose year, wasn't it? Last year was a glorious spring, and it was perfect for roses. So, but you know, it's always something, right? It's always something. Any other questions before we talk a little bit about deadheading? Deadheading. And as someone of my generation, deadheading is following Jerry Garcia around the country. But in a perennial garden, deadheading is removing the spent flowers. And there are a few reasons why you might want to do this. Number one, sometimes those old flowers don't look good, as on that Penstemon Husker's red. There are some plants that the seed heads just are not that attractive. Other plants, they look good. Sedum Autumn Joy looks great. The seed heads look great. Black-eyed Susans, purple coneflower, very attractive, right? So there are some plants that look nice, and a reason for leaving the seed heads might be because birds eat the seeds. Purple coneflower and the echinacea and the asters, birds all eat those seeds, so that's valuable to leave them. They're not unattractive. Another reason for leaving seed heads on perennials is if you want them to self-seed. If you like the fact that the foxglove wander around the garden, or the lychnis, you know, that gray foliage plant with the magenta flowers that kind of self-seeds everywhere. If you like that, then you let those plants go to seed and you don't deadhead them. If, however, you do not want to be weeding self-seeded plants out of the garden or editing out those self-seeded plants, you want to take away those spent flowers before they make seeds. And so you want to cut them off. There are some plants that will continue to flower longer if you deadhead them. And in general, it can just improve the look of the garden. Now, most of the time, I personally don't go out and meticulously take away spent flowers on most of my perennials just because it's too time consuming, right? But there are some plants that I will wait until they finish flowering, like the daylilies. After the daylilies are done, I will go out and cut the stem, the flowering stalk, back down to the plant, and it improves the look of the plant. For a plant such as Stelladoro daylilies that many people have in their gardens, that plant should be promptly deadheaded. If you want that plant to rebloom in August, you need to get rid of those seed pods quickly before they develop. And then those plants will come back and bloom again in August and September. So there are some, you kind of make that decision as to whether you're going to remove the old flowers based on the style of gardening you want to do, whether you want to be out there deadheading during the course of the summer or not, whether you want to be weeding self-seeded plants. And not all perennials self-seed, so there are some plants that you can plant and they don't self-seed very prolifically, and so you can just let them go to seed and it isn't a problem. And other plants you'll find in this time of year, you see all the little babies coming up. And so that can really, really give you that sense of what to do in the garden, is what you're seeing going on with the different plants. I want to say quickly a word about low maintenance gardening, because of course we're all interested in it, right? And that's the thing I hear when I do a consultation. That's what everybody tells me. I want a low maintenance garden. And I understand what they're saying, because I don't want to be gardening every hour of the day. I've got a lot going on in my life. But I will say this, that if you think of what has been important in your life, maybe it's been your job, right? Most people don't have low maintenance jobs. Jobs take work. Maybe it's been your marriage. I don't know anybody with a low maintenance marriage. I'm sorry. Right? Maybe it's been your kids. I don't know anybody with low maintenance kids, right? You think about what has been important in your life. They are things that take effort. And our gardens, I believe, are one of those things that can be so important in our lives. They not only provide that visual beauty that we want, they give us good exercise. I was just reading a study the other day about how the essential oils that plants give off stimulate the production of our white blood cells. And so being out in the woods and out in our gardens and among the trees actually makes you healthier, right? So our gardens give so much back to us. And what are we complaining about a few hours spent weeding or mulching or deadheading for, right?